Hi, everyone. My name is Joel Erickson. I've been coaching debate for 4 years, and I am super excited to walk you through how to judge a debate round. I've tried to make this presentation as accessible as possible for new judges, while hopefully still insightful for returning ones. So, without further ado, let's talk about the fundamentals of debate. In order to have a debate, you need some kind of topic, a subject for the debaters to discuss. We call this the resolution. This year's resolution or topic is in democratic elections, the public's right to know ought to be valued above a candidate's right to privacy. Now, although that may seem a little complicated or verbose at first glance, just think about it this way. You're basically evaluating a comparison between two different rights. You're contrasting the right to know versus the right to privacy, trying to determine which one is more important. For a debate to exist, you need two different positions. We call the debater who defends, who supports, who advocates for the resolution the affirmative speaker. The affirmative's responsibility is to prove to you that the resolution is true. If you think about the two ideas in the resolution, the right to know and the right to privacy, as two competing teams, the affirmative is on the right to know team. The negative debater opposes or rejects the resolution. Now, usually they'll do this by being on the right to privacy's team. They'll be telling you that the right to privacy is actually paramount to the right to know. But sometimes the negative will tell you that the two sides, the right to know and the right to privacy, are actually equally valuable, or that there's something logically flawed about prioritizing the right to know over the right to privacy. But don't worry about any of that. 99% of the time, the negative debater will take the side of the right to privacy over the right to know. And if they do something unconventional or unusual, it's their responsibility to explain to you exactly what they're doing and why. So now that we've addressed the fundamentals of the debate, we've talked about what the resolution is and the two opposing sides in this discussion, we'll talk about how the debate round will unfold. There are two kinds of speeches in the debate: constructive speeches and rebuttals. Constructive speeches mean the debaters will spend the majority of their time presenting a case, just a cohesive series of arguments for their side of the resolution. So, for instance, the affirmative will begin the debate with a constructive speech that links a bunch of arguments together in an attempt to demonstrate to you that the right to know is superior to the right to privacy. Rebuttal speeches mean the debaters spend their time demonstrating that their case is superior to their opponent's case. Debaters are no longer constructing their main arguments. Instead, they're vetting their main arguments through the crucible of the rebuttal speeches. They're engaging their case with their opponent's case, and they're demonstrating that they emerge on top. Here are all the different speeches in the debate round. I know this is a lot of text. I don't want you to worry about memorizing it. Just notice that it follows a certain system. Each speech has a little acronym, and the letters in the acronym corresponds to words that you've already learned in this presentation. So the A stands for affirmative, the N stands for negative, the C stands for constructive, and the R stands for rebuttal. So the affirmative starts off with a 6-minute constructive, negative follows them up with a 7-minute constructive. And at this point, the constructive speeches are over. The affirmative and negative debaters have both demonstrated their cases for you, and we move into the rebuttal phase of the debate. The affirmative then gets the first rebuttal with 4 minutes. The negative gets a single rebuttal with 6 minutes, and then the affirmative gets a second short rebuttal at 3 minutes. The format is designed so that each team gets equal speaking time. Both speakers present for 13 minutes apiece. But the advantage of speaking first and last, occurring to the affirmative, is counterbalanced by its shorter speeches. So the affirmative gets the opportunity to define, to frame the debate, and to have the last word, but they get less time apiece to do it, whereas the negative can consolidate their arguments in longer speeches. Now notice I have in italics here the cross-examination periods. This is where the debaters get 1 3-minute period apiece to ask their opponents questions. One additional procedural that you should note about this structure is there shouldn't be totally new arguments and evidence presented in the final speech. So that's just not fair to the debater who doesn't have a chance to respond. All right, Now that you're acquainted with how a debate round is structured, let's get into the nitty-gritty of how you ought to evaluate the debate round. First and foremost, you'll have a ballot. This ballot has three components. The first component are the speaker point boxes. Speaker points give you a scale by which you can rank the debater's presentation and an opportunity to offer comments about it. So it'll be comprised of several criteria, things like persuasiveness, organization, delivery, evidence, and a 1 to 5 scale in which you can rate the debater based on how well you think they did. And then the comment section is where you can provide feedback on their delivery. Like you can tell them they talked too fast or they scowled while they spoke. Things that you found desirable that you want them to continue doing, or things that you found undesirable. Debaters will review your ballots at the end of the tournament, so make sure that you address them to debaters and don't say anything on the ballot that you don't want the debaters to read. The second main component of the ballot is the decision. This is where you indicate who won the debate. There'll be a box for the affirmative. There will be a box for the negative. At the end of the debate, you evaluate which debater proved their case better than the other, which debater refuted the most important arguments in the round, and you will vote for the corresponding checkbox. There will be another checkbox on the ballot called double loss. Double loss is not a tie. It is a punitive action reserved for extreme situations. Like if both debaters went haywire and started swearing at each other, that would probably be justifiable grounds for a double loss. But in 99.9% of scenarios, you'll be voting affirmative or negative. And the third and final element of your ballot is the reason to decision section. And this is just where you explain to the debaters why you voted for one debater over the other. You want to err on being more thorough than less thorough in this section. Debaters will read these after the tournament. They'll probably want a good explanation for why you voted the way you did. So take some time, invest some mental energy into producing a good reason for a decision. So that's your ballot, the three components of your ballot. You'll be completing speaker points. You'll be indicating who won the debate, affirmative or negative, and then you'll be offering a reason for decision, why you voted the way you did. Your main objective in this debate is to be objective. What this means is you're not evaluating the round based on any specialized knowledge you might have, or how you think the debate round should have gone, or even which side is more persuasive to you, since what you think is persuasive is probably influenced by your predisposition or bias. Rather, you evaluate the round based exclusively on the arguments the debaters make. Now, it's a lot easier said than done, right? To divorce yourself from your bias and actually make an objective decision. So here are a few strategies for how to pragmatically do that in the context of a debate. First of all, rely on the distinction between the speaker points boxes and the decision boxes. You're not going to evaluate the round based on the better speaker, but who made the better arguments. So use the speaker point boxes to determine whether or not the better speaker actually made the better arguments. In fact, the reason why your ballot is partitioned this way is to help you make that decision, to recognize that good speaking isn't necessarily correlated with good arguments, and to consciously help you to separate those two things in your mind. So you don't just vote for the debater who spoke better. That's not to say that the worst speaker will always win the debate round. There is something to good speaking correlating with good communication abilities. But remember, that's not always the case. Don't be biased towards rhetoric, be biased towards good arguments. So that's the first way to help be objective, is to separate speaking and presentation abilities from actually robust arguments. The second strategy is in your reason for decision section, when you're telling the debaters why you thought one of them won the round, acknowledge your bias up front. Writing things like, although I agree with affirmative, negative provided better reasons for their argument that blah, 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 helps you confront your own bias to the debaters and demonstrates that you're more objective. After every argument that you find compelling because you already agreed with it, ask yourself, was this argument compelling because I think it's true, or was this argument compelling because the debater actually gave a good reason for it in the debate round? Just becoming more, like, these strategies are going to help you become more self-aware of your own bias and ensure that you can be maximally objective for the debaters. So that's your overarching objective. The way that you track how the debate's unfolding is to make sure that you take copious notes. Now, instead of just writing a huge block of text, like taking out an 8x11 sheet of paper and starting at the top and writing the affirmative speech in a paragraph and the negative speech in a paragraph, turn your 8.511 sheet of paper horizontally and then divide it into 5 columns, because there are 5 speeches in debate. Each column is going to represent each speech. And then flow the debate round. Well, flow is the word we use in debate for taking notes. I'm sorry, I jumped ahead of myself. I'll explain that in a second. Record the speeches in debate like you're taking an outline. So use bullet points, use numerals, try to use shorthand so that it's not just a block of text, but rather an outline. This is going to help you by drawing arrows to connect which arguments respond to each other throughout the debate. This is why we call it flowing, because ultimately when the debate is over, you'll see how the responses flow across that horizontal sheet of paper. That the affirmative speaker in the very first speech of the round made X argument, and the negative speaker responded in their speech. So you'll draw an arrow connecting the affirmative speech to the negative's response. And the affirmative got back up in their rebuttal, and they refuted the argument again. So you'll draw another arrow to that speech, and you'll see how the debaters track various arguments across the debate. The only way for you to stay engaged here is to take copious notes to make sure you're flowing diligently. Now, finally, best way to ensure that you give the debaters the very best decision you can is to evaluate the debate round after every speech. Each debater will receive 3 minutes of preparation time to allocate before their speeches in the debate. So they might take 1 minute and 30 seconds before one speech, and then 1 minute and 30 seconds before another speech to collect their thoughts and prepare for what they're going to say. Use that moment of silence to evaluate the debate round in your head. Don't wait for the debate to end to figure it out. Ask yourself how you think the debate is developing in real time. Like, who do I think is winning at the end of the speech? Why do I think they're winning? You might want to have a separate piece of paper there to jot down your thoughts. That'll make your decision really easy because you won't forget as much. You'll be evaluating the debate round in real time. That's Judging 101. You're just supposed to remember the following things. Be as unbiased as possible, take good notes, and make sure that you can come up with some good reason to vote for one side or the other. That's way easier said than done. I know some of you who have judged before are like, but debates are so confusing. So let's talk about that. Why are debates confusing? How can we diagnose the problem, and what can you as the judge do about it? There seem to be 2 primary reasons why debate can get confusing. First is the curse of knowledge. The more you know about something, the easier it becomes to forget what it feels like to be ignorant. So debaters who have been researching a topic for an entire year and using specialized terminology since they attended their very first debate camp forget what it feels like not to know something. They're depending on a world of shared assumptions and shared knowledge that they've all acquired by becoming experts in a topic, and then forget how to communicate that topic to more ignorant people like us. The second thing is debaters lose sight of the bigger picture in the debate. Now, I think there are 2 main ways debaters lose sight of the big picture, and they're represented here through these 2 cliche metaphors. The first is 2 ships passing in the night. This is where the debaters don't actually refute each other. Affirmative presents their case, negative presents their case. There's no clash. Both sides just discuss their respective cases throughout the entire debate. The second way the debaters lose sight of the big picture is losing the forest for the trees. This means the debaters get tangled up in refuting the most irrelevant points in the debate round without connecting it back to what really matters. So the round devolves into discussing one example for the entire debate, and that example wasn't even relevant. It's just some debater said it, and then the next debater felt like they had to refute it, and then the first debater decided they had to refute that response, and so on. So why am I telling you this? I'm telling you this because knowing the causes, being able to diagnose the problem, can help us determine the solution. So now that we've analyzed why debate can be confusing, let's talk about how you solve this as a judge. First things first, leverage your judging philosophy. Before the debate, the debaters will oftentimes ask you to provide some kind of perspective or share about your experience with debate or give a judging philosophy. The reason why they're doing this is because they know that the burden of communication is on the communicator, not the hearer, not the recipient, the communicator, which means that if they don't communicate to you, they've failed their fundamental responsibility. Which means that if you tell them something in the judging philosophy and they disregard that, they disregard your request for them to communicate to you in a particular way, they're failing their duty as a communicator, and that is totally something you can bring up on the ballot. So tell them that you're looking for things like clear organization. You're looking for lots of clash. You're looking for well-warranted points. You're looking for things explained to you like you're 10 years old. These are all things that I've said in judging philosophies. If they fail to accommodate you, you can talk about their failure to do so in your reason for decision. And the judging philosophy is a super important part where you can tell the debaters you want the round to be debated this way. And if they don't oblige, then they're failing their duty as a communicator. That's the first thing to do. Second thing to do is remember that not all arguments are created equal. A debater can win 99% of the points, but lose sight of the most fundamental point and therefore lose the round. Don't just go through and tally up which debater won the most arguments. Instead, try to figure out which points are most fundamental, and whichever debater won those win the round. Like, we can conceive of a totally extreme situation in which a debater made an incredibly cogent and persuasive case for why celery is better with hummus than without hummus. And yet, because that's not the resolution, they debated the wrong resolution. They missed the point of debate and they lost the round. So they won 99% of the arguments for why celery is better with hummus than without. And yet they lose the debate round because they didn't debate about the right to know versus the right to privacy. Super extreme example, but it goes to show you that not all arguments are created equal. Just because a debater wins more arguments didn't mean they win the most important ones. So you're probably asking, how do you determine what are the most important arguments in a debate round? Hopefully the debaters will tell you them. But if they don't, here's a quick guide to sorting through the confusion that occurs in some debates. Debaters just need to demonstrate three things to you. First, they need to give you the what. What are you using to evaluate the resolution? How are we comparing between the right to know versus the right to privacy? They're usually going to accomplish this by providing a standard or a value. They'll say the value for determining whether the right to know ought to be valued above the right to privacy is something like justice. So they'll give you a standard for the debate. They'll give you some mechanism by which you can evaluate the debate round. Secondly, they need to tell you why you should evaluate the resolution their way over any other way. And oftentimes debate rounds will come down to which tool you should use to evaluate the debate round. Should you use the one the affirmative offered or the one the negative offered? And then finally, they should tell you how they succeed and how their opponent fails their evaluation. Debate rounds will inevitably devolve into lots of very particular and nuanced arguments. And hopefully, your debaters harken back to the big picture and put together these three what, why, how points for you. But if they don't, I wanted to give you this crash course in basic debate strategy so you can do it for them if need be. That pretty much covers everything. We've covered a lot of territory in this. I just want to review everything really quick. Debaters are talking about a resolution. The affirmative debater defends it. The negative debater opposes it. They do so by building their cases in constructive speeches and deconstructing their opponent's case in rebuttal speeches. You're trying to be as objective as possible in evaluating the debate round, but sometimes debates can be really confusing. And the way you mitigate that is through telling the debaters up front what you're looking for and remembering that they have a few basic responsibilities to tell you how to evaluate the debate round, why you should evaluate the debate round that way, and how they do better than their opponent according to their evaluation standard. Good luck. I hope you really enjoy the phenomenal competition you're about to experience.